Anyone else on the floor now to be heard. Let me just make one comment about an amendment that's coming up, kind of closely related to the subject that we just discussed. It's the Sanders Amendment number 4318. I knew this would happen, that the oil spill would be used to pass another agenda, and sure enough, that's what's happened. The Sanders Amendment is aimed at stopping oil production altogether. It does three things. It repeals the expensing for intangible drilling costs. It repeals the percentage depletion for marginal oil and gas wells, and it repeals the manufacturing deduction for oil and gas production. Now, I predicted the spill in the Gulf would be used as an opportunity to shut down domestic oil and gas wells, many of which are owned and operated by independent oil and gas producers throughout the country, and that's what's happening. This amendment doesn't. Repealing the expensing of intangible drilling costs eliminates the ability to expense intangible drilling and development costs. It's called IDCs, which would force at least 25 to 30% reduction in the drilling budgets, leading to lost jobs, lost production, and higher prices to the consumer. By the way, we haven't talked much about the higher prices to the consumer. Cap and trade, if they were successful in doing that, we would feel that in a matter of weeks. Despite the rhetoric, the IDC expensing is firmly grounded in sound accounting practices and principles and has been in the tax code since 1913. The IDC expensing is similar to the expensing by other companies for technology, wages, fuels, which other industries expense for their operations. So what they're doing is singling out the oil and gas industry just willfully to stop that put them out of business. Likewise, since 1926, small producers and millions of royalty owners have had the option to utilize percentage depletion to both simplify and account for declining in the value of minerals produced from property. It's kind of complicated, but the percentage depletion recognizes the oil and gas reservoirs are depleting by production. So it is the amount which small producers can expense to reinvest in production. Percentage depletion is particularly important for the production of America's over 600,000 low-volume marginal wells. I'm particularly interested in this. In my state of Oklahoma, we have mostly marginal well production. Marginal wells is a well that produces less than 15 gallons a day, barrels a day. So it's a very small, the smaller type of production. The average marginal well produces barely 2 barrels a day. You know, we've been talking about millions of barrels out in the Gulf, 2 barrels a day. Yet, cumulatively, they account for almost 28% of the domestic production in the lower 48 states. Now, since every onshore natural gas and oil well eventually declines into marginal production, the economic lifespan and corresponding production of nearly all natural gas and oil wells should be reduced through the elimination of percentage depletion. Finally, Congress has already frozen the manufacturer's tax deduction specifically for only oil and natural gas companies less than 2 years ago. All other domestic manufacturers can deduct income at a higher rate than oil and gas companies, and repealing the entire deduction for oil and gas companies is only targeting oil and gas production. Shows what the motivation is. We got to remember a couple of very important points. When we seek to target certain industries for tax treatment, first, oil and gas companies employ Americans and fund our communities. Oil and gas companies employ over 9 million people in the United States. Approximately 3 million land and mineral owners from coast to coast are the beneficiaries of monthly checks from royalties produced on their properties. Many of these individuals are small property owners, very small, and some of them are just small family farms. In fact, the National Association of Royalty Owners just today ranked this as its #1 concern on its website today. That's today, saying that the Sanders Amendment is their #1 target. And these are not rich people. These are small farm owners, landowners. States annually collect billions of dollars in oil and gas excise and severance taxes that furnish critical funding for roads, schools, law enforcement. And by punishing America's oil and gas industry, this amendment only puts unemployment and state local funding in peril. Secondly, punishing our oil and gas industry only makes us more dependent on foreign sources of energy. After President Jimmy Carter imposed a windfall profit tax, we remember that, on the oil and gas industry back in 1980, the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service later determined that its results were hugely counterproductive, finding, quote, and I'm quoting now, this is what Jimmy Carter did back in the 80s. He said the windfall profit tax reduced domestic oil production between 3 and 6% and increased oil imports between 8 and 16%. This made the United States more dependent upon imported oil. America's natural gas and oil companies are already paying taxes at the highest rates. Figures from the Energy Information Agency indicate that America's major oil producers already pay, on average, more than 40% income tax rate. The EIA also reported in December of 2009, on average, 53% of the oil and gas companies' net incomes are paid in taxes compared to 32% from other manufacturers. So now is not the time to group the entire oil and gas industry together for punishment. Punishing the entire industry is in the sledgehammer approach of this amendment uses only increases the cost of all Americans and makes us more dependent upon foreign countries to run this machine called America. As I often say, people say they don't want oil, they don't want gas, they don't want coal, they don't want nuclear. Well, in the final analysis, how do you run this country without? You can't. And if we stop or retard in any way the ability to produce oil and gas in the United States, it will merely make us more dependent upon foreign countries for us to drive this machine called America. With that, I yield the floor.